Are we good? Hey.
We're good. Okay. Awesome. Welcome everybody to this session on podcast advertising. My name is Tyler Elliston. I'm the founder of Right Side Up. This is Krystina Rubino, who I work with. And she is a wealth of information about podcast advertising. So I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions, and then we will open it up to questions from the crowd at the end. I wanted to start by telling the story of how I met Krystina and how she was introduced to me. So a little bit of context about Right Side Up. So we're a fractional marketplace of marketers. So I started this business in 2016. And so I was on the hunt for the very best marketer across every skill set. That's what I was trying to find. And we had gotten some companies that were looking for podcast advertising. This is late 2016, early 2017. And honestly, we said, we don't know how to do that well. We really wanted a digital marketer to sort of apply that lens to the channel, and we felt like it was either digital marketers that didn't really understand the medium or people that understood the medium but really didn't have sort of this performance marketing digital sort of underpinning. So then I had coffee with a marketer who we had deployed, and after the meeting she sent me this email and she introduced me to Krystina saying, Tyler, as mentioned in our chat, Krystina is an all-around amazing growth marketer who made the transition from digital to offline by becoming an amazingly savvy podcast expert and helping me steer the Lift program into the right waters. She's now driving the marketing program at Tripping, but is also playing around with the idea of a side hustle. I have a feeling I want to be in the room when the two of you amazing professionals meet up, but I will try not to be a stalker. So that was the introduction. That was April of 2018, and we had a phone call, and I was like, man, she is really good. It's like, gosh, she is super smart. She understands the medium. She approaches it in a data-driven way. This is amazing. And I hired her like in less than a month later.
Yeah.
And so since 2018, Krystina's been building the offline program at Right Side Up. And you and your team have spent how much money in the channel?
Over $250 million.
Over $250 million?
Over $250 billion.
Oh, $250 billion. Right.
With a B.
Right. So across roughly how many brands have you represented? Just ballpark.
Maybe a little over 100.
Right. Okay. So Krystina she was already a podcast expert when we found her, but she has since, with the help of her team, done an incredible job for a lot of brands buying a lot of media. So the goal of this conversation is really to sort of plumb the depths of her knowledge and share it. There are kind of three sort of top subtopics that we'll cover. One is podcast as a medium and how it fits into the media landscape. The second one is really tactics of how you make the channel work for you as a brand specifically. And then we'll talk for a few minutes on the future of the channel and where she sees it going. And then again, we'll open it up. So as we go, please write down your questions, remember them, and we'll take them at the end.
Perfect.
Anything to add before we jump in?
Bring it on.
Okay. Let's start with sort of the channel landscape. And maybe if you could start with, if you can imagine back to 2018 when we first met to now, how has the channel evolved?
In 2018, the entire medium, if I'm not mistaken, had only just crossed into 9 figures in terms of overall advertising investment. And so the medium has only really been meaningfully monetized for about 12 to 14 years or so. And even then, like in 2015, 2016, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in annual media spend. When you think about other mediums, you're talking about well into like the many, many billions of dollars. So the other interesting thing for me was it was not yet a mainstream media channel. So what I mean by that is when you think about a lot of mainstream channels like radio or television, they are consumed by a broader swath of the US population than not, right? Podcast was a really niche medium. And what has really surprised me in the last decade, I've now been in it for about a decade, is how very much it has mainstreamed, how the gender divide was crossed with Serial, if anybody's ever heard of that one, and just how the medium has also grown up in that time.
Awesome. And when you think about it now, how do you see it as sort of a cultural force in today's world?
I mean, I think, and I'm not going to get into politics, I don't have enough strength or coffee for that,
Who did
But
you vote for, Krystina?
You what?
I said, who did you vote for? But we're not.
Great. Yeah.
It's a joke.
I'm going to throw something at him. Also, I've been working with him for 7 years, so this is actually super fun. And I did not know that he was going to bring that email to today. So if I turn beet red, really thank you so much for that. It's also one of the best people I've ever worked with, but that was my attempt to turn him red. In terms of it being a cultural force, I think it's, again, regardless of political affiliation, I don't think that you can discount the impact that podcasts had on the 2024 election. And I don't think that anybody really saw it coming, except for all of the people who very wisely booked their candidate on some of the most scaled shows on the medium. And I think that if you just look at reach alone in that moment, but then if you also translate that to cultural relevance, SNL has done some really, really, really funny content on, the couple of bros with a mic podcast concept. And whenever you see something lampooned in such a mainstream show like SNL, it's a good indicator to see that you've arrived as a medium. So I very much view it as the medium itself has become such a cultural force, and influential people and humans listen to podcasts. So I always look, I'm like, what do influencers consume and what do influential people consume? They consume podcasts, which then has an impact on the rest of culture too.
So if we accept that it has become a cultural force, why has it been able to do that? Like, what's the magic of the channel?
It's the authenticity. I think people are drawn to authenticity. We are drawn to honesty. And in a media environment where it can be really challenging to find people that you trust and people that you're interested in and amused by, when you look at the people who you follow, I'm sure everybody in this room has a favorite podcast, right? I don't know about you. Raise your hand if you have clicked on a Facebook ad or a banner advertisement in the last year. That's actually way more people than I thought were going to raise their hands. Meta thanks you, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm actually just a plant. But if you'll notice, I don't think I'm lying here to say that wasn't a majority of the room, right? And so, but think about it. When was the last time you heard an ad on a podcast and you were interested enough to check out the product that was being advertised? Decent chunk of actually about the same, which is, that's intriguing. I think it's also like the people in this room are gonna be really hard to reach and motivate via any kind of advertising. But one thing that I personally love about the channel is that the ads are really hard to skip. And I know that I alone have bought too much skincare because the hosts of Forever 35 have influenced me to buy skincare, but they're all bangers. Like, that's how I found out about Drunk Elephant. My regular routine has largely been determined by products that they've recommended. So it's just for somebody like me, who frankly is really hard to reach via traditional channels, I should say reach and motivate, even just as traditional channels have waned in consumption. So the other day I was catching up with an in-house marketer, and we were onboarding their brand and talking through what channels and placements, et cetera, were working for them. And so when it came to TV, I tagged her and was like, hey, what channels and formats are working best for you in linear television? She's like, well, news and sports, but that's all anybody watches anymore. And I was like, oh man, you're so right. And so when you think about it, that's a pretty narrow aperture to be able to reach and motivate people at scale. So it provides a quality interaction in a way that feels really authentic. I like to call it grown-up influencer marketing, not least because even some of the people in this room have contributed to the way that it's monetized, the way that it's repeatable for brands, the way that there are standards that are put forth by trade associations that help to wrangle all of the media that we buy into something that becomes repeatable for brands, which is what we're all, as somebody who prides herself on being fairly channel agnostic, even still, that's a pretty special opportunity.
That's great. You mentioned TV, you also mentioned Facebook and the poll. How do you see podcasts relating to, I'll call them traditional digital channels like Google search and Facebook, Meta?
I think it can drive a highly incremental audience to paid search or paid social. I think that scaling either medium is a prerequisite for scaling into offline channels. What I mean by that is, by and large, I think that if you can't make meta work in some way, you probably have a product market fit challenge. You really don't want to discover a product market fit challenge by spending tens of millions of dollars on television. At least I don't. I don't like to set money on fire. It's not even going to keep you warm at that point, right? So like, let's buy media that's going to accomplish something. The other part of it that's interesting is when it comes to paid search. I don't know about you guys. If I'm listening to a podcast, I'm not talking about video. We can get into video later. I know everybody's talking about it. But when I think about the way that I consume audio, I don't know about you. Oh my God, I don't have my phone on me and I feel like so weird right now. But like, I literally don't listen and stare at my phone the whole time. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm doing something, I might be working, whatever. So when you think about it, there's gonna be breakage. What I mean by that is there's no quick tap to action, right? And so what does that mean for marketers? Well, it means that humans are going to do the thing that is human behavior. We are going to search. We're gonna say, it was like the thing with and I don't remember what it was called. It was a toothbrush. It was something about like, it was like Quip, I think. Maybe it was CW, and they might not be able to spell it. There might be so many different things that they search for, but ultimately, somebody's gonna search for it because it's an ingrained human behavior. If your ad is not there when somebody is searching for your brand, guess what? I hope your organic presence is there. And if neither of those are there, congratulations, you've just made a competitor money. So if you don't have either, or preferably both of those channels stood up at scale, I think you're gonna have a really hard time because those channels drive scale for business. And a lot of our business is really talented marketers who are helping companies scale through traditional growth channels, right? You're also going to discover things about the business, like there's a problem in my funnel, there's a supply chain issue, my website went down, my conversion funnel is not optimized properly. There's so many things that you discover in the course of setting up platform-based advertising that you would do yourself a disservice to basically leapfrog over that learning process and head straight into offline. I would never recommend a brand do that so early.
That's great. So, if we talk to, we talk to hundreds of companies a month. If we talk to 100 companies and all 100 say, I'm in 2 channels, and we say, okay, what are those 2 channels? We can predict that probably 90% of them, the 2 channels, are going to be Google and Facebook, like the vast majority of the time. So then they often are asking us, well, what else should we consider? Either we're tapped out or we think we're going to tap out on these 2. What should we consider? If we say podcast and we send them to you, and they say, great, let's test it. What are some of the perceptions they're going to have about Meta or Google that they're going to bring to podcasts that you need to like cure them of, like different mechanics of the channel?
The thing that no one wants to hear from me is always patience. That's
tough.
It's very tough. It's a virtue. But a lot of marketers are, especially performance marketers, I don't know how many growth marketers we have in the room here today, but having spent time in-house, Tyler has led performance marketing teams for most of his career.
Yeah, many years.
Many years. Many years.
Thank you, Krystina.
You're so welcome,
yes,
Tyler.
Thank you. My hair is gray. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been gray for a long time, though.
Once again.
Yep. Really, really great. Hey, Tyler. No. I gotta have fun, guys. We do something fun for a living. We should all have fun and smile a little. Patience is a big part of it because it's an on-demand medium. And so what I find is that it is harder to predict the path to success when it comes to the immediacy of it. There are brands that we work with where they are just so advantaged by having product market fit, by being underexposed, that when you shine the spotlight of podcast advertising on them, it hits like that. And that's great, and I love that for them. But that is not going to be what happens for the vast majority of brands who are expanding to a new media channel for the first time. Maybe it's the first time they've ever done audio. You know, a lot of visual brands come to us and they're just like, I don't know, man, like we're a clothing brand, or we are a super design focused company. And I'm like, if only there was a way to paint a picture with words. It's literally what podcasters do. So you have to be able to trust, and we can get into host-read advertising later, but you have to be able to trust that these highly effective people who are effective at communicating in an audio fashion will be able to communicate your brand. I would also say, so it's patience, also it's on-demand consumption. I am sure that a podcast is being published right now that people in this room want to listen to. You're not going to, hopefully you're not going to stop what you're doing and literally go and listen to that show right now. What's probably going to happen is you might be flying back home this weekend or next week, right? And you might say, oh, I missed that episode of 99% Invisible, or I missed that episode of the Bill Burr podcast. Publishes Mondays and Thursdays. And I actually love Bill and his whole vibe. We could talk about post-read ads later and how it is working with comedians. It's actually a lot of fun. But you know, the podcast publishes on Monday and Thursday. It's topical, but parts of it are evergreen. If he has a guest that you're interested in, right? You're gonna download it and you might listen to it on the plane. You might stock up a couple of episodes and you might be going on a camping trip or whatever, and you're gonna like listen to them that weekend when you're not connected to the internet. So that delay in consumption means that marketers have to be patient, because the download might happen, the impression might have been recorded, but the actual listen has not occurred yet, and the industry's not there yet with understanding listens. So I would say that, and then the other part is just setting aside enough budget to do a meaningful test. Mm-hmm. The worst result for me as a growth marketer, regardless of channel, is getting a false negative, a false positive, or I would argue worse is an inconclusive result. Like, well, we spent this money and like we don't know if it worked. I've come to the ends of campaigns. In a past life, I worked much more on the brand advertising end, and at the time, metrics were a little more loosey-goosey. And like you'd be sitting there and be like, I think that worked. Do you think that worked? And it's like, dude, part of the reason I was so attracted to performance marketing is that I don't want to be in a room and ask or answer those questions anymore. I just want to know if it worked. I want to know if it made us money. And then I want everybody to move on with their lives and do what working facilitates them to actually do with their time.
There are a number of things you said there I want to dig into as we move into sort of the tactical part of the conversation. But before we get there, one more question on just how the channel is perceived. You mentioned that in 2016 or 17, it was really a niche channel. I think there's still a perception from a lot of marketers in-house that this is a niche part of their media mix.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your take on, like, is that a fair perception today?
I think that I would encourage them to trade notes with other in-house marketers who are investing well into 7 figures monthly. And I'm happy, I connect people all the time who are working in-house to trade notes, because I think that, we are fractional in-house marketers. And I think that the best things in our industry happen when we all talk to each other and trade notes, and it's like, this is working for me, is that working for you, vice versa. I think the biggest part of it for me is that more than half of the US listens to a podcast monthly. And when we think about the way that, frankly, when we think about CPMs for business decision makers, I've heard LinkedIn is incredibly expensive. It can be super effective, and we make it work for a lot of businesses on a different team in our company, but it's a really expensive proposition to do B2B, right? In traditional senses. Well, there are 1 million business podcasts. And then above and beyond that, guess what? Business decision makers, I'm a huge NBA head. Like, I watch 10 games a week. So, and I'll listen to podcasts occasionally on the association, whatever. You'll reach me outside of a business setting. And so, yes, there's going to be some waste involved, but it's highly effective. The other part of it is, like I said, consumption is there. But there's still a human connection to how the brands are represented in this channel. There's an authenticity to it. hosts say no all the time. And at first, coming from traditional media, I was basically like, how dare you? I'm trying to give you money, sir or ma'am. Like, take my money. And it's like, I don't want to take your money. I'm like, well, what do you mean? My money's green. And it's like, well, my show, first of all, the show is sold out. When was the last time anybody bought an ad online, like display? Literally, this concept of sellout is not a real thing in digital media anymore. You can still sell out a show and podcast. And this is also why I tell people when they're like, I'm just gonna do it via like one of the trading platforms, whatever. I'm like, that's cool, you're gonna buy my leftovers. Because we literally buy the best shows that perform the best, and they are monetized by somewhere between 15 and 20 brands. Those hosts make a really good living. The networks who represent them make a bunch of money, and everybody goes home happy. It can be that easy, and it still is.
Okay, and so before we get into that, gosh, there's so many questions I want to ask you. Okay.
When you get that smile, I get worried, but continue.
Yeah, so you see the channel not as saturated. You still see it as the early days. I think about SEM in the 2000s, Facebook in the 2010s.
If you do the early adopter,
where's podcast in that curve in your view?
If you're doing like the early adopter curve, right? It's a bell curve. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the early adoption curve. We are right at majority. We are out of early majority, but we are right into early to late majority. So it's still early enough, to your point, to get in and to, especially if you're a challenger brand, especially to traditional CPG, the reason that you tend to see, I don't know if I'm borrowing from a different question, but the reason that you tend to see not as many flagship brands in the medium is because they probably work with a traditional agency, of which I have worked at in my career. There may not be enough money to get me to work at one again. Just being honest. We can talk about my agency PTSD another time. But it's probably because their agency is using a tool like MRI or Nielsen, and these platforms don't adequately include or monitor podcast. What does that mean? Well, when you're planning a reach campaign, when you're planning literally gross rating points, targeted rating points, you're gonna shortchange that channel. And so that's why you don't see a lot of marquee brands who are scaled on radio or scaled on television really investing heavily in podcast advertising. It's a failing of their agency. And what I say to brands, we work with a lot of high growth brands, we work with a lot of disruptive brands, and we work with a lot of brands who either are not category leaders, are somewhere in the middle of the pack, or are straight up creating a new category. And I tell brands all the time, for somewhere between $2 and $4 million a month, you can actually own the whole channel. People will know you. You will find your place among, that would probably put you in the top 15 of podcast advertisers. If you spend $4 million a month on Meta, you may or may not get a named rep right away. You might wind up in mid-market hell with some inbox somewhere. Dude, somebody from Facebook is probably gonna see this and be like, who the hell is she?
Facebook is great.
Facebook's great.
It actually is. It actually is.
No, I will say, as my deepest amount, I just hit the lav, sorry. We're double mic'd and I'm super thrown off by it. As somebody who spent more of my career in digital than offline, which I know is weird because I'm up here talking to you about offline marketing, I believe so much in the value of those platforms and the value they create for business. I also am very well acquainted with their failings. And channels like podcast advertising and YouTube endorsement, streaming audio to an extent, CTV, these are all really valuable alternatives for a brand to invest in before you start advertising against diminishing returns on Facebook or Google, which I'm trying to call it Meta. I'm not calling Twitter X. Like, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna be frozen in time on a couple of these things.
Sorry, you're a dinosaur.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I think it is.
I'm telling your kids you said that. They love me.
It is undeniable that a lot of the companies we work with, virtually all of them have Facebook in their media mix.
Yeah.
But they are, a lot of them, it's a lower amount than it used to be. Tracking is harder, targeting is harder.
Yeah.
And there is more tolerance for tracking and attribution questions, which is one of the things I want to ask later. But as we really dig into the tactical piece of podcast, let's just say that you've got a new brand that's come to you. They know nothing about advertising and podcasts, and they want to nail it. How do you guide them in terms of show selection, budget? Like, where do you, give me some quick hitters on sort of best practice.
Yeah, so in terms of budget, I tell brands, depending on scale of your other marketing efforts. So if you are a brand that is investing a few $100,000s a month across the board in paid media spend, you can probably get away with investing about 75 to 90 grand in the channel over about a 9 to 12 week period. I know that's super specific. There's a reason for it. What you're trying to do is test across enough different shows, across enough different verticals, which, notice I didn't say genres. iTunes genres and the categorizations in this channel are meaningless. So are top podcast charts. I heard you, Paul. Paul Rees-Mandel from Signal Hill is like, because it is. It's like, what does society and culture even mean? No one, not a single human being has ever been able to explain that to me, right? What makes a podcast comedy versus lifestyle? I don't know. So what we've actually done is we buy somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 shows a year. We've re-verticalized every single show that we buy. And we do it so that we can create cohorts of shows where it's like, okay, you're a true crime girly, but like, do you want a cult? Do you want a murder flavor? Like, what are we trying to do here? Different listener for different parts of true crime, right? Different performance for different brands, etc. So what I tell people is probably somewhere between 75 to 90. You're going to test across 5 to 7, maybe 8 publishers, probably somewhere between 15 and 20 shows. If you're a more scaled advertiser, usually I recommend somewhere in the neighborhood of like 125 to 150. You're just going to test slightly larger shows. You're going to get a solid litmus on like what actually is working. And what you're not looking for in that first test is for it to back out completely. I don't know about you guys, but I don't go into testing new media and expecting that every single medium, every single placement is just going to bang out of the gate and I'm just going to literally scale it to the moon, right? We have to allow time for optimization, for iterative testing. So what I'm looking for in that first test is a litmus. I am looking for a very clear path to scale. I am looking for a clear path to optimize to my target customer acquisition cost. And I'm also looking to understand the customer. What I've found in podcast is your CLTV or your LTV, your lifetime value of a customer, is higher than its digital counterparts. What does that mean for brands? It means that my allowable CAC, or customer acquisition cost, can be higher in this channel, which is great. Which means that if I then understand that, I can invest more confidently in this medium and scale it from there. The other thing that I tell brands is in terms of setting up measurement, I do recommend that they set up either Podscribe or Magellan. I'm agnostic. I'm an advisor for Magellan, but I am agnostic. We love and use Podscribe. We love and use Magellan. I often advocate that brands set up either one. I no longer advocate that brands set up pod sites because it's now called Spotify Ad Analytics and it's now owned by Spotify. Some publishers have stopped accepting it. What that means is that you're not going to be able to measure your entire media plan. So I always recommend and coach people, like, do not only look at direct attribution. For the reason I talked about before, nobody is going to like sit there, stare at a podcast and be like, yeah, I can, first of all, you can't click on anything. The other part of it is you're not gonna like stop what you're doing and go over to this show or this site, right? Or download an app or whatever. So you're trying to capture that activity and using pixel-based server-side attribution, also setting up a survey and doing survey-based methodology. I'm a huge proponent of. There's platforms like Fairing, again, I'm an advisor of theirs, but Fairing, No Commerce, there's a couple of other survey platforms that are very solid. These are ways to understand the impact that not only podcast is driving on your media mix, but how other channels are fitting in. What you most commonly see is that you see attribution take some credit from paid search and reapportion it to the channels that are driving the human behavior to search. Because I don't know about you guys, but I didn't wake up this morning and be like, I'm gonna search for this brand I've never heard of before. Something exposed me. I was exposed to that brand's message. It resonated enough for me to then go and find it another time. This is how my biggest pet peeve when I worked in paid search is when a marketer in-house, well-meaning, but ultimately not understanding how it worked, would say, how can I buy more branded paid search? And I'd be like, well, more people have to search for your brand. I don't have a magic wand. If I did, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be in Aruba somewhere. But like, really, like you have to do advertising to get people to search for you. And like, what you're really doing is moving unaided and aided awareness. Mm-hmm. And we're not gonna just sit here and be like, the Halo. Every time I hear somebody talk about Halo, I'm either like, it's a video game, or I'm like,
it's a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that is such a shitty term for just not understanding attribution. Like using an MTA or a marketing mix model, an MMM, you start to understand where all of your conversions are actually happening from. And even, I know as an industry, just more broadly in advertising, we're hooked on last click. We gotta break up with him. Like, it's just not cute. He's done us dirty. It's just, we're long past time, right? Even view through attribution is challenging because when you think about, I know Google decided to not kill cookies, but I don't know what they're gonna do. Nobody does. And all I know is that I want my business to be resilient in the face of that. And I wanna have multiple attribution methodologies that are pressure tested because, spoiler, none of them are 100% right. Everything is shades of wrong, but I want to have them roughly tell me the whole story. That was a really long answer, but that's, yeah, sorry.
No, lots to work with there. I'm curious, let's talk about interpreting results.
Okay.
What does success look like if we start with 15 to 20 shows? What are we looking for, and can we turn it off at 4 weeks if nothing seems to be working?
No. And no, because okay. So I talked about the delay in consumption, and I talked about the fact that we're not, as listeners, we don't stop what we're doing and listen to a podcast ad, and then we don't stop what we're doing after that and then go and buy something because a podcaster told us to once. Great if that happens for you. Love that for you. That is not what happens in a vast majority of situations. What you want to do is buy 3 integrations per show. I'll give you my playbook. I mean, also good luck executing it with all of my love in my heart. But you want to buy 3 integrations per show. I'm seeing this really messed up thing that some agencies are doing out there where they're just booking tests with shows and then canceling when it doesn't work out, but they're booking annuals because they're trying to like basically take advantage of audience acquisition that happens throughout the year if the show does work out. And I'm just like, that is bad business. We test the exact right amount. As a growth marketer, I want to test the exact right amount that gives me a very clear path forward. And I don't want to test any more than that. I don't want to test any less than that. And then usually at that time, around 9 weeks in, 10 weeks in, we've at least gotten our second integration into every show. Because we're also accounting for the human effect here, right? Sometimes hosts take a second to really wrap their head around a product. Sometimes they say the name wrong in the first ad. And sometimes there's a human element to what we do. And there's actually a part of it why it's charming. I mentioned Bill Burr before, but he has done some absolutely cracked ad reads for brands on this channel. They actually, the compilation of those ad reads has hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. When was the last time anyone sought out advertising content to consume it? And it's because like in the middle of an ad for Sherry's Berries, he sits there and starts questioning in an existential way why he's selling chocolate covered strawberries. And it is if you haven't watched that ad before, it is effing hysterical. But it's that thing where it's like, not every ad is going to be read the same. Not everything's going to be great. Sometimes we have to coach talent and help them understand like, hey, we actually do need you to repeat the call to action a few times, and it would be super helpful if you spelled it correctly. And then we got to do a make good, and it's a whole situation, et cetera. So I do counsel people, like, you have to be patient. When you're interpreting results, be prepared for about half of the shows to fail and not hit your goal. And you might be saying, why are you telling me to do this if half my shows are gonna fail? The average hit rate for initial testing in this medium is somewhere between 20-25%, meaning about a quarter of the shows are just gonna hit your goal out of the gate. They are, if you're looking at a bullseye, they are right in the center of that bullseye. Right side up, because of I mentioned we've invested about $250 million in index data in this medium. And what that means is it had to clear the bar of a human on my team saying, the campaign was sound, the measurement was sound, this is a good experiment, we can use this data and basically create a control where we can then use it to predict performance for other cohorted advertisers. Because of that, our hit rates are actually somewhere around 30 to 40% for first tests, and they get better with iteration. So that is part of why, when I was saying good luck before, I wasn't just being flippant. I wouldn't want to buy in-house for more than 6 months right now if I didn't have access to a performance data set like that, because the shows that are hitting and the shows that are working are changing constantly. There's times where I worry that I'm not close enough to buying anymore, that I'm gonna start using examples when I'm talking up on stage and like sound like somebody's like, hey guys, like I haven't bought an ad since Serial. You know what I mean? So, and Serial's a great show and it's still sold, you know, in back catalog. But I tell people, like, you're looking for a signal. There's another whole spate of shows in that initial test that you're gonna be like, you know, if you come down on your pricing, or, you know, we got about 80, we indexed at about 80% of our goal. Could we meet in the middle on pricing? If you can actually give me this rate, we can continue. We do that all the time. And part of that is we share performance data with publishers. It's indexed. We're not out here being like, here's my client's customer acquisition cost. You definitely work with their competitor. You should tell them. That's not what we're doing. We're giving them indexed performance, because the thing that I hear most commonly from publishers in this industry is, I really want to do better, and I want to get a renewal. I want to do that. How do I do better? What worked, what didn't? And so, like, creating that feedback loop, we probably get to a place where we can renew somewhere between 40 and 45% of shows for tests that work. And then when we're spending our next dollars, female lifestyle with a focus on advice did really well for this. Let's go out to these other shows. Let's start hitting Girls Gotta Eat. Let's hit the Dear Media universe. Let's do this, let's do that. And let's get out there. But let's now direct our iterative testing, that second spate of tests, in a much more targeted way. Sure, if you want to accelerate learnings, you can invest $250,000 in your initial test. Some agencies out there will tell you that's what you should be investing in. Spoiler alert, it's because they work on a media commission and they're trying to back into it. So, probably shouldn't have said that loud either, but I don't work on a media commission anymore, so I don't say it.
There are a lot of great points there. Authenticity is one of the, I think, most valuable parts of the channel, right? Because it's very different, and it also has a lot of positive outcomes, right? The discovery is huge, which you talked about. Also, I'll never forget one time personally did an audit of a client's GA account, and we were looking at traffic from different sources, and we looked at the vanity URLs from a podcast campaign. I was like, I'm just gonna look and see what the conversion rate is from traffic coming from this campaign. And it was 6x their website average. And that was probably 2019, maybe 2020. And that was when the sort of light bulb went off in my brain. Like, man, endorsement matters so much, and it doesn't just create demand. The enthusiasm it can drive is insane.
It's true. I mean, even just in it's a way to, so when I was picking up my last work laptop, I don't even know if you remember this conversation.
Nope.
But I was convinced that I really wanted a MacBook Pro. And I complain all the time about how heavy it is to carry around. And so Tyler was like, I got a MacBook Air, and he's like, I'm not trying to but here's the reasons that I love it. And I literally went, okay, sent it to our HR manager and was like, new laptop, thank you, I love you, bye. And that's all it took. I didn't do any further research. I mean, I've been a Mac user for 20 years, so I knew it was gonna be in the family. But it was that moment I was like, okay, which one? Great, I trust you. I know Tyler is hard on laptops like I am. Yep. And I know that you wouldn't steer me wrong. And it's like, well, that's a great interaction, but how do you get that to happen at scale? And the answer is endorsement marketing. And I make a distinction from influencer marketing because it's repeatable, it's scalable. Adults are selling this medium, and they are doing it in a way that when I buy something from one publisher and then I buy a different show from a different publisher, there is consistency enough in between the way that we work as an industry to be able to repeat results. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason that I often counsel brands And they're like, what's my first channel I should diversify into if I'm going to do offline? I'm like, honestly, do podcast. For a lot of the reasons I've talked about, but a big one also is lack of production. I've priced out television commercials before. It's crazy. And it's worth every penny to do production at that high of a level. If you're going to throw $10 million in media spend across a video asset, you should probably spend a couple of $100,000 to produce it. There are ways to do it cheaper. I'm sure somebody is going to reach out to me and be like, I actually started. I'm super happy for you, but there is still a production investment that needs to occur. Guess what? I send copy points over to Trevor, who's going to get picked on. But I send copy points we send them over to Trevor. They're distributed to different shows. And the hosts who are already in the studio producing their content produce ads. And what that means is that they're doing the production for me. I don't have to do that production. I literally send a Google Doc out. It doesn't cost us anything incremental. So it's really powerful for that reason too. And then it's authentic. I tell people all the time, like, do not have your copy points exceed one piece of paper. 2 reasons. One, when people print it out, they're not going to flip it around to the back. They're going to miss the call to action. The other thing is, when you pack in so much information, no one's going to throw an endorsement on top of that. It becomes a scripted read. And it's just like, oh, you can tell when somebody's actually like being super scripted. And it's not even an enthusiasm thing. Like, Bill Simmons is a good example of this. Bill Simmons, in the way he speaks, is kind of a dry guy. He's not going to be super animated. If he was, I'd worry that he was like possessed, right? So like to expect him to like magically become the super animated guy when he's like doing an ad read, it's like that's not who he is. He's going to be authentic. And he's probably going to throw something wry in there. But if you pack everything in there and you give him a ton of brand language, you're literally going to hear what it's like when somebody reads off of a piece of paper. And as a listener, you're going to lose interest.
Thank you. One last question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So please get ready to come ask Krystina a question. So last question is really about the future of the channel. Where do you see it evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Considering the amount of publishers who have come back around to offering host-read, embedded, or ad-served embedded ads, I think that what's old is going to be new again. I think people are realizing that the role that podcast plays in your media mix is scaled endorsement. And that's not to say performance marketing has really driven this channel forward. That's not to say that you cannot do brand marketing in this channel. You can and you should. But the way that you buy it requires, believe it or not, a human transaction if you want to do it as effectively as possible. And so when you think about the way that we buy most media, it's transactional, it's through a platform. This is relational. I mean, we know our salespeople, like when I say we call them partners, those are our partners. If we're not doing really well as an industry, we're not doing well as advertisers. Like, dude, I know, like, we know things about these people. We know about their kids. We know about, like, there's a human element to this channel. And then when something goes horribly wrong, I get to call up somebody and be like, yo, the website actually broke. It went down. I need you to pull my ad from next week's episode. I know I'm within 30 days out. I'm so sorry, but the advertiser's website broke or the supply chain broke. We've had stuff like that happen. And in that moment when you can pick up the phone and call somebody, I mean, proverbially, and I know kids now say that, like, whatever. What a time to be alive. There's a human element to it that we're rediscovering as an industry that I find incredibly rewarding because, I mean, we'll probably be on pace to do high 8 figures, maybe 9 figures this year in podcast alone in terms of advertising on behalf of our clients. We do it in-house, so it's really our client's investment. And if we can do all of that, transacting literally via email and Google Sheets and some proprietary tools that we've grown in-house, I don't want anybody to come at me and be like, well, the fact that it's not a programmatic channel purely is the reason that it's not scaling. It's not. It's not.
Great. Thank you. What questions from the audience do we have?
I have 2 related sort of questions. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I told my team targeted by, and you'll get the same result. But I don't know if I believe that. So I wanted to ask, have you bought?
I love our partners at Spotify. However, you cannot replicate the results of buying across multiple publishers by buying Span. Span was built on technology that they acquired that, by and large, for a lot of publishers, is a way for them to monetize remnant inventory. There are opportunities to buy host-read advertisements through Spotify, and some of their property, some of their IP is really valuable, and like we buy direct from them all the time. The reason that audience-based buying doesn't work as well on this channel for brands that are looking to drive performance specifically is it's that human-to-human connection that I mentioned. It's the hand selection of shows, but it's also the fact that you are embedding your ad in content that's topical, relevant, that's current. Even if it's an evergreen show, you're still going out in fresh first-run content. And so what I tend to find with a lot of the audience network style plays is that you're monetizing back catalog. And so the argument is that it's the same consumer. I get it. Intellectually, I understand it. I understand. But that inventory also goes at a far lower CPM. Well, not from Spotify, but that it goes from like a premium CPM to a less than premium CPM. And that's reflected in the value that's driven. The way to do this channel properly and to scale it into profitably investing $500,000 a month for a brand who might only be spending a few $1 million in paid media a year is the very methodical way that I just laid out. And it's giving it enough time to bake and breathe, but also diversifying across publishers. Because testing just Spotify, I had an advertiser recently that was like, so last summer we did 200K in Rogan and it didn't hit. Podcasting doesn't work for me. I'm like, dude, you tested a show. And like, maybe you didn't buy Rogan in the right way. Maybe the way that the buy was structured, maybe there's something happened on your end. Maybe the measurement wasn't there. There's so many things that could go wrong. And we design these experiments in a very specific way to prevent that from happening and to identify a path forward so you can scale confidently. And also, like I said, I pride myself on the relationships our team has with partners. I regularly hear that our team is their favorite, even though everybody's like, I don't have favorites, but and it's because we work together and we care about their business and they care about ours.
And one slide.
Please.
We sell a design, okay, creative assets. So should we only be in design-related shows or business shows where there's lots of wastage?
I promise I didn't plant her. Like, you are literally, I'm like gonna hug you after this because those are two of the best. So you might, there is this like desire to go super contextual. And that works in some instances. I personally have found that works better as a CRM play. Because here's the thing. So like you just said, it's a design tool. Let me use specialty food as an example. So I don't know if I like, there's a finishing salt that I like. I'm gonna sound so bougie right now. My husband and I cook a lot. And if you've ever heard of Maldon salt, it is, I see a nod and you know, and it's just better. It hits good.
Please raise your hand if you've heard of this salt. Wow.
Thank you, people.
Okay.
Thank you, party people. Those are people who know that if you sprinkle Maldon on top of a chocolate chip cookie, magic happens. And also, by the way, if you like lightly like melt a Malamar and put some of that on top, it's disgustingly good. But here's the thing. I already know about Maldon. So if Maldon decided to come into the channel and they were like, we're gonna buy food podcasts, and it's like, you're gonna buy Bon Appetit Foodcast, and you're gonna buy this, and you're gonna buy that. Dude, they know about you already. If you're looking to drive incremental customer growth, or the lovely incrementality that everybody's like, incrementality, I'm like, oh, we learned a new word, it is an industry, I'm so excited for us. But if you're looking to drive incrementality, you need to find that audience in other shows. And so when you think about design, and you think about, well, who is this consumer? Who is this decision maker who's gonna design to use our software? I'm gonna just pick an audience. I don't know what the software is, but let's just say that she's an affluent, call her elder Gen Z to elder millennial, right? We listen to many different shows. You might be stunned for me to tell you she listens to a culty true crime podcast. She listens to sound like a cult, or sounds like a cult. And that show specifically may or may not work for, any given advertiser. But what you find is like, okay, so let's say we buy Sounds Like a Cult. That audience is, the way that ads are embedded in that show are favorable to an advertiser. And there are a lot of shows, like Dear Media has a great slate of shows that are really good at reaching like Gen Z to millennial to elder millennial, all the way into Gen X. And the way that they still sell their ads is episodic. It's ad served embedded. And their content is phenomenal. And they're great partners. And they don't pay me to say that. So you might not think that you can find her on other shows. You might think you gotta go super contextual. I've actually found the opposite. Like, I used to work on NatureBox. I don't know if anybody remembers NatureBox, but there was one time we did this really dumb thing. We were buying Rogan's podcast, and this is in like 2016 or 17, and I was at their corporate office, and I noticed they did a lot of B2B, and they had these giant bags of snacks, and he loved Big Island pineapple and Sriracha cashews. And I was like, can we send some of those 5-pound bags to his studio? And they're like, yes. I'm like, cool. Can we literally just send him like 30 pounds of snacks? Like, I wanted to do something stupid, but that show was a cranker. And it was a dumb thing, but it was also because we'd bought the show for a year and I knew what he liked, and Rogan isn't a food guy, like in terms of like what he's actually, the show's not about food, the show's about everything. So if we would have stayed contextual, we would have actually done ourselves a disservice. It's such a good question. I'm very commonly asked that because contextual works so well in other channels that you want it to work, but it doesn't always work. Any other questions, please? And I think I'm actually moderating the next panel in here. I don't know yeah, so we can go for questions for a little bit. Okay, cool. I'm waiting to be yelled at. Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Allie. I own a podcast studio in East Austin, so
okay.
I work on the other side of things.
Yeah.
And I'm working to help my clients start getting sponsored. I've helped launch over 15 podcasts in the year and a half that we've been open. And
congrats.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I have kind of struggled with is, and you kind of said it earlier, that the metrics were kind of a shit show
Yeah.
when podcasting came out. I kind of feel like it's still that way.
100%.
In the sense that brands look at downloads as the main metric. Do you agree that that's what we should be sending to brands when we're pitching them, is downloads versus plays?
Not every partner can give plays. The other thing with plays and listens, first of all, the challenge also is that consumption happens across many different platforms. And so downloads are almost like a euphemism at this point. It's really just a cost basis. Most of the time we're buying cost per spot. And we're basing it on, let's just say a show predicts to do like 100,000 downloads or impressions, at a $20 CPM. So that winds up being a $2,000 show, right? Math is so hard on the fly.
Let's say yes.
Yeah?
Let's say yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Math is like, I'm like super good at math. I'm good at Excel. I'm an Excel girly, but like I'm not a math girly. So let's say the show is $2,000 and we might, that's the cost per spot that we're willing to pay for that show. It's really the best way for us to transact. And if you are selling on listens right now, there is actually, Spotify does have a way of buying, the name escapes me right now, it's some proprietary name they came up with, but you actually can buy on something closer to an actual listen. The CPM for it is much higher. And so I'm like, do I really care if you change the algebraic equation to charge me more on CPM or charge me more on the actual cost basis that downloads are? Sorry, I'm getting like super technical, but I don't really give a shit. Like, I care if it actually backs out and performs. So if we need to sit there and say like, okay, we're gonna use downloads because that is somehow in the year of our Lady Taylor Swift, 2025. That's the best possible way that we have figured out to transact this channel. I don't care, I just want to give you money to have somebody influential talk about my thing so that people buy the thing that we want them to buy. And we have to figure out a fair way to pay for it. What I find with smaller publishers a lot of the time is they're like, well, we have so many people who follow us on social, you should really do paid social, and you should really do that. We can do all of those things if it makes sense. But your show should be able to be monetized and stand on its own as I'm trying to buy a host-read mid-roll from you. And I want to buy this many, I want to buy 17 a year. Literally, that's every 3 weeks, you buy about 17 a year. And I want to give you this money for it, and I want to book it a year in advance. And it stands on its own. But downloads are, unfortunately, it's the best we have now. It's also a misnomer because so much of it is YouTube impressions. Like, yeah.
Right, so should we be adding, because now we have all of these metrics from Spotify, from Apple, where we can see the plays, we can see the consumption rate. Should we be adding the plays into that number, or should we be taking that download number? Because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't download every podcast that I listen to.
No.
I just listen to it. I might download it if I'm going on a plane.
Yep.
So I work with a lot of podcasts, they're just getting started, but they're investing in my studio to come and record, so kind of bridging that barrier for them to help them get monetized early on. You're getting more listens than you are downloads. So is that number important for us to be sharing to brands?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you see a world where micro podcasts have a space to get monetized? Similar to like micro influencers do? Like we don't need to have 100,000 downloads.
Yes. My advice to micro podcasters is to actually go the affiliate route. I have sent a lot of small, I just saw a ton of nods in the audience. Because here's the thing. It's really hard for somebody like me. Like we tend not to buy a show that's under 10 or 15,000 downloads. And even then that's if you start to go too fragmented, that's when people start like complaining about the burden of execution. And it's a real thing. What I tell people is if you have a rabid following and you're only reaching a few thousand people, like I actually host our show. We have a podcast at Right Side Up called Growth Talks. So self-serving of me to mention it, but we don't have tens of thousands of downloads because growth marketers listen to it. And there's only so many of us, and it's a show we launched last year. So, but our audience is highly engaged. And when I think about the impact that it's had on our business, there's so many people who reach out to us and are like, oh, I heard so-and-so, the CMO from DSW on your podcast, and you guys had such a good conversation. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Awesome. It was really impactful and drove results for us. But it's the irony of it not being big enough to even interest me as an advertiser. Like I look at our numbers and I'm like, eh. And everybody's like, it's not a podcast you buy, Krystina. I'm like, well, I want like more people to listen to it. So it's hard, but I always say go the affiliate route, because when you're doing a revenue share, and also like give me your card and I'll hook you up with our affiliate team. Like seriously. Also the other thing is you can package it up as run of network, and I would look into that as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna come talk to you afterwards. Thank you.
Go for it. Yeah. Happy to help.
We are at time, so maybe we'll stay here. And
are we okay to take one or two more questions, guys? All right,
okay,
cool.
If you need to leave, feel free. We won't judge you,
we'll kick you
too
out.
harshly.
I'll just start heckling people. No, I really won't.
Thank you. I'll be quick.
Oh, please.
You probably guessed by my accent that I'm going to ask a question about geo here. So, coming from Australia, we've got our own podcasting networks, but what's the level that you can start to putting a bundle together from a winery or a goal hanger in terms of live endorsement?
I would say that, meaning in terms of like downloads, basically, when does it become interesting to an advertiser? Well, I actually just gave, so a friend of...
Sorry,
oh.
other way around. So when can we bring an advertiser to a global network for geo-based endorsement from a package of, is there a point now or in the future that that's happening?
We do a ton of international podcasts, actually. Our biggest, I think what's interesting is that like the biggest geographies for us tend to be, Australia has a huge podcasting community and like is pretty well listened to. Australia, the UK, German podcasts, or like Germany is actually a decent consumer of podcasts. Canada, LATAM to an extent. But you can reach a global audience at scale. I would say that it's the easiest to scale at like Commonwealth, honestly. Like it really, like it's the easiest to scale in that geo-target.
Cool. And just a quick follow-up
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
So if I'm an Australian advertiser that's got a bundle of $1 million to spread, and I want to bring podcasts in, but Nomono Network Australia so far hasn't really worked, is there a way to engage larger globals to do Australian brand personalised endorsement?
Yes. I think, meaning that you'd want Australian talent to do the read?
No,
or
as in, take a nice, we'll take Rubino, but that's not going to be it.
Yeah.
What is the buy-in to have an Australian geo-targeted endorsement? Is there a geo-targeting bundle that can be put together?
Oh God, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what sort of spend level are you looking for a wondering, for example?
I think I would advise not doing it with any one publisher. I always advise multiple publishers. And the variance is going to be, there's some partners that you're going to spend a couple of $1,000s with, and then there's some partners that are going to be able to do 30, 40, 50, 100 grand a month because the listens are there. But like, it's interesting with the Australian market because like the listenership is concentrated on shows that you wouldn't assume, and also shows that just happen to have a following in Australia. The one that always blows my mind is, and I don't know if this is still true, but there's a show called Case File, and it's not an Australian show.
It is an Australian.
Oh, it is an Australian show. Okay, I'm a monster. I'm sorry. But I historically we were dealing with this thing where it was like they were selling us U.S. only impressions, and then I was like, well, where are the rest of the impressions? They were like, Australia. I'm like, can we get those too? And they're like, oh, you're already getting them. And when I put an international advertiser on there, it cranked, and I was like, hey, you guys, just because the U.S. tends to consume content from other countries, like other countries are. I will say, like, a lot of ad spend is concentrated in the U.S. from U.S. partners. I like to pride ourselves on not being quite so ethnocentric in our buying. So I'd love to trade notes separately. Yeah, let's find each other. Yeah.
How can people find you? What's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn, probably. I also have a website, just myname.com, but linkedin.com/krubino, I think. And I truly like nerding out about this stuff. So feel free to find me if you see me around, and please reach out on LinkedIn.
That's Krystina Rubino at Right Side Up.
Yes.
Yep.
That also.
Awesome.
Oh, Krystina at rightside.up.com.
Krystina at rightsideup.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. And Growth Talks. Yeah. Thank you. Oh my God. Love you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oops. Sorry.